The deer bolted across the street and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the frustrated predator crouched in the shadows of the concrete drainage opening. The attack came without warning as Lisa passed within 10 feet of the drainage culvert. The 140-pound mountain lion exploded from the shadows with incredible speed, covering the distance between them in a single powerful leap. His massive front paws struck Lisa between the shoulder blades with devastating force, sending her crashing face first onto the asphalt street, while his weight drove her to the ground. Lisa's attempts to scream were cut short as the mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck. His 4-inch canine teeth punctured through muscle and vertebrae with crushing force. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Lisa's back and shoulders, each swipe opening deep gashes that severed major blood vessels and caused massive tissue damage. The 140-pound cat used his incredible strength to pull Lisa's body across the asphalt and down into the concrete culvert, where the darkness and confined space would provide protection while he fed. Lisa's body was recovered 3 hours later by a joint team of police officers and Colorado Parks and wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill when the search teams approached, retreating further into the drainage network that connected to the natural creek system beyond the neighborhood. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail close. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. "I've often wondered about the arrogance that leads us into danger. I've read about a hiker named Felicity who ignored trail close, boasting that they didn't apply to elite athletes like herself. She tore down warning notices, believing taxpayers like her had every right to use public trails. That belief, that sense of invincibility, would ultimately prove fatal." Felicity chose the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail for a solo dawn run. It was 5:30 a.m., pre-dawn, deliberately chosen to avoid what she termed inferior hikers. She wore noise-cancelling headphones, blasting loud electronic music, and carried a backpack with raw steaks for a post-workout protein meal. Now, mountain lions are apex predators, perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain. Males can weigh up to 180 pounds and stretch over 8 feet long. They have powerful hind legs for 40-foot leaps, retractable 4-inch claws for gripping, and 4-inch canine teeth designed for severing spinal cords. They are solitary ambush hunters, preferring to strike from behind and above. Erratic movement, heavy breathing, the scent of fresh meat. These are all signals to a hunting mountain lion. A 40-pound male mountain lion, already hunting in the area and claiming the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail as part of his territory, detected the scent of fresh meat from over a mile away. He began tracking Felicity's movements through the forest, stalking her along the ridge, using rocks and trees for cover. As she rounded a sharp bend, the mountain lion positioned himself on a large boulder, about 15 feet above the path. When Felicity passed below, oblivious due to her music and her belief in her own invulnerability, the mountain lion launched himself in a devastating aerial attack. The predator, all 140 pounds of him, struck her from behind with tremendous force. His hind claws raked down her back, while his front paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. His 4-inch canine teeth found their target, clamping down on the back of Felicity's neck with surgical precision, severing the connection between her brain and body. The cougar maintained his grip, his claws securing his position. His hind legs continued to rake down her spine and legs, opening deep, bleeding wounds. Within 2 minutes, Felicity was dead, the cause a combination of spinal cord severance, massive blood loss, and suffocation. The mountain lion then dragged her body off the trail to a secluded area where he could feed undisturbed. 3 days later, a search and rescue team found her remains. The location and condition were consistent with a mountain lion attack. It was December 3rd, 2014. Fluorescent lights hummed over rows of kennels at the county animal shelter. I remember reading about Jennifer Walsh, a 25-year-old veterinary student, moving between the cages. She believed every animal deserved a second chance. As a weekend volunteer, she was known for advocating for the shelter's most difficult cases, gravitating toward the aggressive dogs, the ones marked with red cards indicating immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75-pound pit bull with a scarred muzzle and eyes that seemed to hold years of rage. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including an attack on a neighbor's child that required emergency surgery. The behavioral assessment was decisive. Too dangerous for adoption. Scheduled for euthanization, Jennifer had been watching Diesel for 3 days, searching for any sign of a gentle soul beneath his aggressive exterior. She saw him pace, heard him growl, watched him destroy every toy. But she also saw moments of what she interpreted as vulnerability. Moments when he pressed against the back wall, softening when he thought no one was watching. The shelter's protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. Staff with years of experience and proper equipment were required for any interaction. But Jennifer had convinced herself that Diesel's aggression was fear-based, that he needed one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with most staff busy, Jennifer made the decision that would cost her her life. She approached Diesel. There are moments when I read a story that haunts me for weeks. The death of Jennifer, a young woman with dreams of becoming a vet, is one of those. She lost her life not in a jungle or a far-off land, but in an animal shelter, a place of supposed safety. It serves as a stark reminder that even with the best intentions, a lack of experience and respect for safety protocols can have devastating consequences. Diesel's body language was a clear warning. He was in his kennel, and Jennifer approached with a slip lead and the key to the isolation room, a small, windowless space used for behavioral evaluations. His reaction was immediate. Lips pulled back, revealing yellowed teeth. Hackles rose along his neck, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. But Jennifer, tragically, interpreted these signs as fear, not aggression. When the kennel door opened, Diesel seemed to shift, calculating. He seemed to assess Jennifer's position in the doorway. This hesitation gave her the confidence to slip the lead around his neck and guide him to the isolation room. Once inside, she closed the door and removed the lead, believing freedom would help him relax. The room was small, just 8 by 10 feet, with concrete walls and a single metal folding chair. Designed for safety, it offered nowhere to run. For minutes, Diesel stood rigid, his eyes fixed on Jennifer. She sat and began talking to him, her voice gentle, unaware she was being evaluated. The attack came when Jennifer stood and took a step toward Diesel, her hand extended in what she meant as a peaceful gesture. But to Diesel, it was a threat. All 75 pounds of him launched across the room, his jaws targeting Jennifer's throat. Her scream was cut short as Diesel's teeth sank deep into her neck, crushing her windpipe and severing major blood vessels. His jaws locked, and he shook violently, tearing through tissue and bone. Blood sprayed across the concrete walls as Jennifer's struggles weakened. The attack was swift and brutal. Volunteers rushed to the isolation room, but the door was locked. By the time they got inside, Jennifer lay motionless, her life ebbing away. Diesel stood over her, muzzle stained red, eyes still burning. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. Jennifer was pronounced dead at the scene. Diesel was immediately sedated and euthanized. The investigation that followed revealed Jennifer had violated multiple safety protocols, ignored clear warning signs, and placed herself in a situation that experienced professionals would have avoided. The shelter implemented new security measures, electronic locks, and mandatory buddy systems. Jennifer's death became a cautionary tale in veterinary schools. The sanctuary's safety measures consisted of a chain-link barrier separating visitors from the gorillas' enclosure, with no additional protection or supervision from qualified staff. Silverback gorillas are among the most powerful primates. Adult males can weigh up to 400 pounds, possessing the strength of 10 grown men. They are intelligent and emotionally complex, but also territorial and aggressive when they perceive threats. I've seen firsthand how quickly a seemingly calm animal can turn deadly. I remember the case of King, the silverback gorilla. He appeared relaxed, even curious, as visitors approached his enclosure. But that was a deception. King's reaction was instantaneous and devastating when a woman named Jessica reached through the fence. What she saw as friendliness, he saw as a threat. He grabbed her arm with crushing force. The details are brutal. His massive hand tightened, inflicting bone-crushing force. Others tried to free her, but his strength was far beyond human capability. One hand held her arm, the other reached for her head and shoulders, pulling her against the fencing. His territorial instincts took over. The attack was relentless. Her attempts to break free only seemed to fuel his aggression. Blood loss and crushing injuries overwhelmed her. Within minutes, she was gone. Even after, the massive gorilla maintained his grip on her lifeless form, a clear warning to anyone who dared approach. The facility, Sunshine Primate Sanctuary, was exposed as an illegal roadside zoo. It was shut down, and King was transferred to an accredited sanctuary. Jessica's death led to enhanced regulations for animal facilities and stricter enforcement of wildlife protection laws. Her family established a foundation to support legitimate primate conservation efforts. It reminds me of another case, a different kind of encounter, but with the same tragic undercurrent of misunderstanding, the wild. It was March 18, 2017, in an upscale neighborhood in Asheville, North Carolina. The first warm evening of spring had arrived. Maria Santos, a 41-year-old single mother and part-time dog walker, was making her evening rounds. She cared for the pets of wealthy residents, a job she'd held for 3 years, building a loyal clientele who appreciated her reliability and love for animals. Her income supplemented her day job at a local veterinary clinic, allowing her to support her teenage daughter. The Mountain View Estates development had been carved out of pristine mountain forest, with builders required to preserve mature trees and maintain natural wildlife corridors throughout the community. Recent construction had disrupted animal movement, forcing bears, deer, and other wildlife to seek new routes through residential areas. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity, particularly as animals emerged from winter hibernation. Maria was aware of these warnings, but had never encountered any dangerous animals during her walks. She carried pepper spray as a precaution and had received training on wildlife encounters. On this particular evening, she was walking 3 large dogs, 2 German Shepherds and a Golden Retriever, when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adult females typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds. Mother bears with cubs are extremely protective and will attack any perceived threat to their offspring. I've read about animal encounters that still haunt me. The sheer power of a wild animal acting on instinct is something we often underestimate. I remember one case in Mountain View Estates, a place where the line between human and animal territory blurred with tragic consequences. A woman named Maria learned this the hard way when she encountered a 300-pound black bear with 2 cubs near some garbage cans. Bears, you see, have an incredible sense of smell, and residential areas often attract them with discarded food. And, when surprised, they can run up to 35 miles per hour. They possess the strength to break down doors and overturn cars. Maria recognized the danger immediately and started to back away. But the 3 dogs she was walking became agitated, barking aggressively at the bears. The mother bear, naturally protective, saw the dogs as a direct threat. She rose to her full height, vocalizing aggressively, positioning herself between the dogs and her cubs. Maria struggled to control the dogs, but their continued barking only escalated the situation. The bear charged, covering the 30 yards between them in seconds. Maria, entangled in the leashes, fell onto the asphalt. The dogs scattered, leaving her vulnerable. The bear struck, her massive paws hitting Maria's back and shoulders with bone-crushing force. The bear's jaws clamped down on Maria's head and neck. Residents, hearing the commotion, called 911 and tried to scare the bear away. Eventually, the mother bear retreated with her cubs, leaving Maria motionless. Paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late. Maria had died from massive head and neck trauma. The investigation revealed that improperly secured garbage containers had attracted the bear family, creating the conditions for this fatal encounter. Wildlife officials determined the bear was acting defensively, protecting her offspring. The bears were relocated and the community implemented new waste management protocols. Then there's the story of Rebecca Martinez on October 15th, 2016. The Georgia sun was setting over her 10-acre property, casting long shadows across makeshift kennels and chain-link runs. The constant barking of 40 rescue dogs echoed across the land, the soundtrack of her life. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her unofficial sanctuary, taking in dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch. The aggressive ones, the biters, the animals marked for euthanization. Her recent divorce had left her financially strained and emotionally isolated, with only her dogs for company on the remote property. Her neighbors had grown used to the noise, though some whispered concerns about the woman who seemed to care more about dangerous animals than her own safety. She rarely left the property, moving between enclosures with hands scarred from countless bites. Friends noticed the changes in her. She'd grown thinner, more withdrawn, speaking more about her dogs than anything else. Her ex-husband had tried to warn her about the dangers, but Rebecca dismissed his concerns. Even the feed delivery drivers had begun leaving supplies at the gate rather than approaching the main compound. The main enclosure housed her 3 largest rescues: Rex, a 90-pound pit bull mix with a history of severe abuse; Titan, an 85-pound Rottweiler cross; and Scar, a 75-pound mixed breed whose face told the story of his fighting past. What Rebecca didn't realize was that these 3 had been forming an alliance over the past few weeks. The warning signs had been there for anyone trained to recognize them. The 3 dogs had begun sleeping closer together, sharing food bowls, and displaying coordinated territorial behavior. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipation to something more predatory. But Rebecca, exhausted from managing 40 animals alone and emotionally invested in seeing progress. There are moments when the wild reminds us how close it truly is. I've seen it in old texts, in the faded accounts of encounters gone wrong. April 3rd, 2017, in Thor, France, at the Thor Zoo Safari Park. The wolf sector, meant to mimic Yellowstone, seemed still. But something was waiting. Rebecca's story has always haunted me. The metallic clanging of kibble buckets, the frenzy of anticipation in those dogs' eyes. It's a scene I can almost feel. She was going through her daily feeding routine, a routine she had done thousands of times, but this time something felt different. The air, she thought, was charged with more than just humidity. As she unlatched the gate and stepped into the enclosure, her boots slipped on the muddy ground after a thunderstorm. The buckets crashed, spilling food everywhere. Rex, one of the dogs, shifted. His eyes locked onto her, and in that moment, she wasn't the woman who had saved him. She was competition. The attack was sudden and brutal. Rex, all 90 pounds of him, slammed into Rebecca, his jaws tearing into her shoulder. Titan and Scar joined in, their pack instincts taking over. They dragged her further from the gate, their teeth sinking into her legs. Rebecca fought desperately, but it was no use. The feeding frenzy lasted nearly 10 minutes before the dogs finally backed away, leaving her motionless in the mud. Her body remained undiscovered for 3 days until a delivery driver arrived with dog food. Animal control found the dogs still in the enclosure, showing no signs of aggression. Rex, Titan, and Scar were euthanized, along with 12 other dogs deemed too dangerous. Rebecca's death sparked debates and new regulations, but for those who knew her, it was too late. I still remember the chill I felt when I first read the report. A jogger, Camille, had unknowingly crossed into a wolf enclos. She probably thought the barrier was nearby, having seen the wolves behind fences before. But this time, there was no fence. The wolves emerged from the trees, low to the ground. Camille turned and started running, but it was too late. She fell. And then, it was over so quickly. The rangers arrived within 10 minutes to find the wolves clustered over her body. An autopsy confirmed death by massive blood loss. The aftermath was a civil lawsuit, a settlement, and procedural retrofits to prevent it from ever happening again. But the story didn't end there. Just a few years later, on a scorching July day in Oklahoma, another tragedy was brewing at a roadside sanctuary called Wildwood Big Hat. A young woman named Ashley Martinez, seeking unique photo opportunities, was about to learn a brutal lesson about apex predators. African lions, despite any human contact, retain their wild instincts. Adult males can weigh over 400 pounds and see humans as either a threat or prey. Their jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, and their claws can inflict fatal wounds with a single swipe. I've seen the photos. I've read the reports. The details always stay with me. Ashley, a young woman full of life, eager to capture a unique memory, approached a massive African lion named Caesar. She wanted a selfie. What happened next was a tragedy fueled by a terrible mix of naivete and a facility's negligence. Ashley was visiting a sanctuary. It was supposed to be a safe haven for these animals, but it turned out to be anything but safe. The owner was giving tours, telling stories, and then Ashley saw her chance. While her friend distracted the owner, she climbed over a 4-foot chain-link fence to get closer to Caesar. The lion was resting about 10 feet away, his eyes on her. At first, he didn't seem aggressive, but as Ashley crouched down and held out her phone, Caesar's demeanor changed. His ears flattened, his tail twitched. Then, with explosive speed, he attacked. It was over in minutes. Caesar, acting on instincts honed over millions of years, saw Ashley as prey. His paws struck her chest, his claws tore into her, and his jaws clamped down on her neck. The investigation later revealed the facility was operating without proper permits and insurance. Investigators later determined that the fatal wound likely occurred when Giovanni twisted as the wolf held his arm. A freak tear along the artery that caused near-instant collapse. Officials ruled it a food-provoked escalation involving juveniles, noting that the wolves had been feeding near unsecured rations. A short-term monitoring program followed, but no culling was ordered, as the pack showed no further boldness toward humans. Giovanni's funeral was held 5 days later in Iosta. Then there's the story of the Lawson family. It was July 15, 2016, when they arrived at the remote Sundarbans National Park in West Bengal, India. I can picture it. The vast mangrove delta stretched endlessly before them. A maze of tidal channels and dense vegetation, where the Ganges River meets the Bay of Bengal. Ancient mangrove trees rose from the brackish water, their aerial roots creating an impenetrable network. This UNESCO World Heritage Site harboured one of the world's most dangerous ecosystems, where saltwater crocodiles lurked beneath the surface and venomous snakes coiled in the canopy above. Genevieve Lawson, a 42-year-old real estate agent from London, had insisted on booking the most expensive boat tour package available. She was known for her demanding personality and unwillingness to accept limitations. She'd already berated their local guide, Ravi, multiple times during the morning briefing. Her husband, David, a 45-year-old investment banker, tried unsuccessfully to moderate her increasingly aggressive behavior. Their teenage children, Emma and Jake, watched uncomfortably as their mother dismissed every safety warning as unnecessary fear-mongering designed to limit their premium experience. Ravi, despite his 15 years of guiding experience in those treacherous waters, found himself intimidated by Genevieve's constant threats of negative reviews and demands for closer wildlife encounters. The motorboat had been equipped with safety barriers specifically to keep tourists safe from the apex predators that ruled this ancient domain. But Genevieve viewed these precautions as obstacles preventing her from capturing the authentic jungle photographs she demanded. The Sundarban's mangroves serve as the exclusive hunting ground for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers, apex predators that have adapted uniquely to this aquatic environment. Unlike their mainland cousins, these tigers are exceptional swimmers and have developed an unusual willingness to hunt humans in water. Weighing up to 400 pounds and measuring over 10 feet in length, these magnificent cats possess 4-inch canine teeth, capable of crushing windpipes and delivering fatal wounds within seconds. Their distinctive orange coat with black stripes provides perfect camouflage among the dappled shadows of the mangrove forest, making them virtually invisible as they move silently through the water. During the afternoon tour, their boat approached a narrow channel, where Ravi spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline. He immediately cut the engine and whispered for complete silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his urgent warnings about remaining in the boat, Genevieve became frustrated with the distance and declared she needed closer photographs. Against all protests from her family and guide, Genevieve stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep channel water. The murky tidal water concealed her movements as she waded toward the mangrove shoreline, camera held high above her head. Unknown to the group, a massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream and had detected their boat's engine minutes earlier. Sundarban's tigers are ambush predators that use water as their primary hunting medium, approaching prey with complete silence while swimming. This particular male had successfully killed humans before and recognized the splashing sounds of vulnerable prey entering his territory. The tiger slipped into the water upstream and began swimming toward Genevieve with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. When Genevieve reached the muddy shoreline and began photographing tiger tracks, she remained completely unaware of the approaching predator. The tiger closed the final 20 feet underwater, using its powerful limbs to propel itself through the murky channel with deadly precision. The attack erupted from the water with explosive violence. The massive tiger surfaced directly behind Genevieve and immediately clamped its powerful jaws around her throat from behind. The 4-inch canine teeth punctured through her neck muscles and crushed her windpipe with over 1,000 pounds of bite force. The tiger's signature killing technique involved suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the massive pres collapsed her airway instantly. Genevieve's body went rigid as the tiger's teeth severed major blood vessels in her neck, causing massive internal bleeding. The predator's powerful forelimbs wrapped around her torso, while its hind legs found purchase on her lower body, holding her in an inescapable grip. The tiger then began its drowning technique, pulling her backward into deeper water while maintaining its cruel grip. There's a silence that follows a fatal strike in the wild, a stillness that feels heavier than the air itself. I've read countless reports, but one always comes back to me. The story of Genevieve, a woman killed by a tiger in the mangroves. The tiger, after crushing her windpipe and severing arteries, held her underwater until she lost consciousness. It was November 15th, 2016, in the remote forests of Primorsky Krai, eastern Russia. Snow fell, muting the usual sounds. A forestry worker named Nikolai Baronov had been silent since morning. He was 52, a man of the forest. He monitored traps, logging boundaries, and poaching activity in the buffer zones near the Cody Allen Mountains. He lived alone, his life mead by the forest's rhythms. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve, following reports of wolves nearing villages. He rode out before dawn on his snowmobile, carrying bread, tea, a hand axe, and flares. He preferred working alone, claiming a second engine scared off wildlife. His assignment was simple: document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves were increasingly active, driven from higher ground after a collapse in wild boar numbers. They could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, hunger pushing them across the frozen ground. Their diets shifted with the season: deer in autumn, carrion, smaller mammals. In the hard months of winter, when prey vanished beneath ice or snow, instinct could turn to desperation. A human scent, faint and unfamiliar, might trigger the same ancient reflex: to follow, test, and close the distance. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the same warnings that morning, but didn't take them seriously. He checked his flare gun, but left his rifle behind. By noon, the weather shifted, with gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor's radio attempts went unanswered, likely due to battery failure from the cold. When evening came and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgin, a neighbouring ranger and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route. He rode out around 5 p.m. with a flashlight and a sidearm. Tracks were faint but visible, a single snowmobile line winding north, then stopping abruptly about 800 metres from the ridge. The engine was half buried in snow, its headlight faintly glowing. The scene showed that Nikolai had dismounted, perhaps to clear ice from the track. Around the site, another pattern emerged: paw marks, deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines, evidence of pacing. Then the circle tightened. From that point, the scene unfolded as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. A snapped branch at chest height and a torn glove 10 feet away. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down. Wolves and man. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. As the attack progressed, the evidence suggested coordinated movement. Bite patterns indicated coordinated restraint from multiple angles. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Boot prints ended mid-stride, replaced by drag marks. Yevgen followed them cautiously, revolver drawn. The forest was unnervingly still. He found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed at least 4 individuals, 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Yevgen radioed the base immediately. It took nearly an hour for a snow vehicle to arrive, by which time darkness had swallowed the clearing. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns for analysis. The stench of blood lingered even in the cold. The pack didn't return, but distant howls echoed as the rescuers secured the area. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dalna for examination. Autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae, consistent with a fatal bite. Time of death was estimated shortly after the onset of the attack. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. There was no footage, only photographs from the recovery team that were never released publicly. Then there's another case, a world away. It was June 14th, 2015, and the Sunset Lake subdivision in suburban Tampa, Florida, was settling into another warm summer evening. The gated community, built around a series of interconnected retention ponds and decorative canals, had been marketed as a tropical paradise for retirees seeking the Florida lifestyle. Walter Walt Kowalski, a 67-year-old retired plumber from Ohio, was enjoying his 5th year in the Sunshine State from the comfort of his backyard patio, which overlooked one of the community's scenic waterways. Walt had moved. The alligator had been submerged, motionless, near the dock for over an hour, waiting. It was waiting for ducks to approach the feeding area, and then it exploded upward with devastating force. These creatures have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years, perfectly adapted as ambush hunters in aquatic environments. I remember reading about a case down in Florida. A man named Walt had moved there after selling his plumbing business, drawn by the promise of year-round golf and outdoor living. He bought a modest ranch home with water access, complete with a private dock. His routine involved sitting on his patio, watching the sunset, and tossing breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. The Sunset Lakes community had been built on reclaimed wetlands, with retention ponds and canals to manage stormwater. These waterways were connected to natural creek systems flowing into Tampa Bay, allowing wildlife to move freely. Walt had noticed more alligators recently, but he'd learned to coexist, as most Florida residents do. His regular duck feeding had inadvertently created a reliable food source, attracting waterfowl from all over. Adult male alligators can reach lengths of 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, with jaw muscles capable of exerting over 3,000 pounds of pres per square inch. They're opportunistic feeders, consuming birds, fish, mammals, and, occasionally, humans who venture too close. One evening, Walt was relaxing on his patio when he noticed his favorite fishing lure had become tangled in the vegetation near his dock. He waded into the knee-deep water, using a net to free the lure. He'd done this many times before without incident, confident that the shallow water was safe. The attack came from directly beneath him. A 12-foot male alligator clamped down on Walt's right leg with bone-crushing power, instantly fracturing his femur and severing major arteries. The alligator initiated his signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water. The violent rotation dislocated Walt's hip and pulled him fully into the canal. The alligator dragged Walt toward the deeper center, where its superior swimming ability made escape impossible. Within minutes, Walt's movements ceased, the result of drowning and massive blood loss. Emergency responders arrived within 10 minutes of the call, but the alligator had already retreated with Walt's body. Police and wildlife officers worked through the night to locate and capture the reptile. The investigation revealed that Walt's regular duck feeding had attracted the alligator, leading to the fatal attack. Walt's death prompted immediate changes to the community's water safety protocols, including warning signs around the ponds and canals. I'll never forget reading about the alligator's bite. Over 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. It's a force almost impossible to imagine. They can launch themselves from the water with explosive power, and anything moving near their territory is seen as food or a threat. I remember one case in particular, a tragic story from an airboat tour. It had been going smoothly for nearly an hour when the guide pointed out a massive alligator sunning itself on a mudbank, only about 20 feet away. This reptile was huge, easily 12 feet long and weighing over 800 pounds. It was perfectly still in the heat. One of the passengers, a man named Michael, started taking pictures. He was excited to show his colleagues back in Seattle such an impressive animal. But his excitement got the better of him. He leaned too far over the edge of the boat, trying to get a better shot, and his phone slipped from his hand. Without thinking, Michael lunged, reaching out to catch his phone before it fell into the water. That's when it happened. The alligator, which had been watching the boat with predatory patience, saw Michael's sudden movement and attacked. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed. Its powerful tail propelled it through the water like a missile, aimed right at Michael's exposed arm. The alligator's jaws clamped down with bone-crushing force. 3,000 pounds of press instantly shattered bones and severed arteries. Michael screamed as the alligator's momentum pulled him over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and other passengers tried to pull Michael back into the boat, but the alligator held on. It began its death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its grip on Michael's arm. Michael's struggles grew weaker as he lost blood, suffered crushing injuries, and began to drown. The alligator never loosened its grip, continuing the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing more trauma, ensuring its prey couldn't escape. Within minutes, Michael stopped moving. The alligator dragged his body into deeper water, disappearing beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body wasn't recovered until the next day, when wildlife officials found the alligator and retrieved his remains. The tour company immediately put up physical barriers around the passenger seating areas and gave enhanced safety briefings for future tours. Michael's death led his family to push for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. During a tour, Kendra grew frustrated with the viewing restrictions. She wanted access to maintenance areas. Dr. Mukasa refused, citing the extreme danger. But while the group observed chimpanzees in a distant enclosure, Kendra noticed an unlocked gate leading to a restricted zone. Despite the warnings, she slipped away, convinced her experience had prepared her for anything. The maintenance area brought her within reach of Boso, the sanctuary's dominant male. He was a 150-pound adult who had been rescued as an infant. Bozo was known for his aggression toward unfamiliar humans. He saw Kendra as a threat. When she raised her camera, he interpreted it as a challenge. His response was immediate. He lunged and grabbed her arm with crushing force. I've spent years tracking animal behavior, learning to read patterns in the snow. Photography, for me, was always both a passion and a way to make some extra money. But one trip into the woods, a trip that seemed like any other, turned into something unimaginable. It was February 9th, 2014, near Langer, Saskatchewan, and the morning light filtered slowly through the boreal forest. My cousin Jeff and I often went together to retrieve SD cards from my trail cameras. We'd grown up hunting and fishing, though we didn't carry firearms anymore. This time, after a light snowfall, we were checking cameras near a frozen creek north of Waskew Lake. We'd heard distant howls before, but never close. I always believed wolves avoided humans instinctively. The plan was simple: a 2-hour snowmobile ride, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. Wolves in that region were typically grey, thick-coated animals, averaging about 90 pounds. They moved in tight family groups, their strength in coordination, silent pursuit, and patience. Under normal conditions, they avoided people, focusing on deer and moose. We dressed in insulated gear, carrying only a single red flare for safety. By 9:30 a.m., we parked the snowmobile near the creek and began walking the last half mile through packed snow, our breath hanging in the still air. At first, everything was normal. We reached the first camera, brushed off the lens, and swapped the SD card. Around 10:15, as we crossed the creek, Jeff's boot slipped on a patch of ice. As I crouched to help him up, steadying him by the arm, we both noticed faint movement among the trees across the creek. The animals stood still at first, only their eyes catching light. Jeff straightened and waved his arms, shouting to scare them off. But the wolves didn't run. Unbeknownst to us, a freshly killed deer lay half buried in the snow, about 20 yards behind the tree line, a cached carcass the wolves had dragged there the night before. The pack was food-stressed, defending their kill rather than hunting. They began to fan out slowly, forming a loose semicircle. I muttered that they were just curious, That noise would drive them away. But even as I spoke, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. We began backing up the slope toward the snowmobile, moving quickly, but without turning. The wolves followed, quiet and steady. Then the first lunge came. A grey blur across the ice, jaws clamping onto the back of my leg with a force of 300 pounds per square inch. The impact drove me face first into the snow. Jeff spun and reached for the flare, but his gloves fumbled with the cap. 2 more wolves broke from the trees, bounding fast, their paws sending up bursts of white powder. I tried to kick free, leaving streaks of blood against the snow. I managed to roll onto my back and swing an arm, hitting one wolf across the muzzle with my camera bag, but another struck from the side, teeth finding my shoulder. Jeff finally snapped the flare to life, the red flame hissing. He swung it toward the animals. One wolf snarled and darted back, fur singed along its flank, but the others held ground. I was on my knees now, one hand pressed to my thigh, blood pumping dark and fast through my fingers. I tried to rise, but my leg gave out beneath me. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back momentarily, circling just out of reach. I slumped sideways. I find myself often reflecting on the stark contrast between our modern lives and the untamed wilderness that still holds sway in certain corners of the world. It's a contrast that can turn tragic in an instant. Consider the case of Jeff and his cousin David. Jeff swung the burning flare, its hiss cutting through the night, forcing the wolves back into the shadows. But the wound on David was too deep. Within a minute, he was gone. Jeff managed to call for help, a faint signal reaching a ranger station. 40 minutes later, authorities arrived to find him shaking uncontrollably beside David's body. The official report listed the cause of death as blood loss from trauma to the femoral artery, consistent with large animal bites. The pack was later trapped and relocated. Wildlife biologists believed the wolves were defending a food cache, but that offered little comfort. Then, on December 9th, 2018, in Canyon Vista, Los Angeles, a different kind of tragedy unfolded. A 16-year-old named Kevin Chen, a promising athlete and student, decided to take a shortcut home after basketball practice. He cut through an undeveloped lot, something he'd done countless times before. But this time was different. The wildfires had displaced predators, forcing them into new territories. Local authorities had warned about mountain lion sightings, but many residents dismissed them as routine. Kevin, though aware of the warnings, had never encountered any dangerous animals. Mountain lions are solitary predators, with juvenile males often displaying more aggressive behavior as they try to establish their own territories. They may target easier prey, including domestic animals and, occasionally, humans. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown lot, an 80-pound juvenile male mountain lion was stalking him, using the area as its hunting ground. The attack came from behind. The mountain lion launched itself from the brush, landing squarely on Kevin's back. His claws dug into Kevin's shoulders, and his jaws clamped down on the back of his neck. Kevin's screams echoed through the hillside community, alerting nearby residents. Police and paramedics arrived within 10 minutes of the first 911 call, using Kevin's cries to locate him in the brush. There's a story that haunts me, a stark reminder of the boundaries between humans and the wild. It involves a young man named Kevin, who lost his life in 2015 after being attacked by a mountain lion displaced by wildfires. I remember reading the news reports at the time, and the sheer tragedy of it stayed with me for days. It's a harsh lesson about where urban life meets the natural world. The mountain lion, startled by the arrival of emergency responders, fled into the surrounding hills. Kevin tragically succumbed to his injuries during surgery. The investigation revealed a disturbing truth. The young mountain lion was simply trying to find a new home after being driven from its habitat by wildfires. Wildlife officers later euthanized the animal, deeming it too dangerous to relocate. Kevin's death led to significant changes in the community. His 20-acre property was a maze of kennels in converted sheds, housing nearly 80 dogs. Tommy specialized in popular breeds, but the real money came from the security side of his operation. 4 massive dogs patrolled the perimeter, 2 cane corsos and 2 mastiff mixes. These weren't pets. They were weapons acquired from a defunct fighting operation and trained to be aggressive. Financial press had been building for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, and facility maintenance ate into profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations had forced him to operate more carefully, cutting back on food, medical care, and maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat, had been reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. Tommy didn't understand that hungry guard dogs were exponentially more dangerous. Hunger sharpened their predatory instincts, made them more territorial, and reduced their tolerance for human presence. The dogs had been showing increased aggression for weeks, fighting among themselves over food and showing less deference to Tommy's commands. He was desperate, distracted, and dangerously overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the Missouri countryside was silent except for distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod, but his attention was focused on financial calculations rather than the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy dealing with a sick litter. Their hunger had reached a critical point. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first, ensuring their compliance before entering their territory. But financial stress and exhaustion had made him careless. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows near the feeding area. His 125 lb frame moved with surprising silence, his massive head lowered in a hunting posture. Behind him came the others, Titan, Rex, and Scar. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into darkness as he screamed for help. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his massive jaws crushing bone. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh. Scar circled the attack, darting in to bite and retreat. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators, focusing on disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience, and hunger had made them methodical in their violence. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. The animals he exploited ultimately became his executioners, their hunger and desperation turning them into the very monsters he tried to create. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? I remember reading about a case in Missouri. A man named Tommy ran one of the state's largest illegal puppy mills. He used guard dogs to protect his operation, but one day he backed away too late. Tommy's body was found partially consumed near the feeding area, surrounded by the very animals he thought would protect him. He remained undiscovered for 3 weeks as the dogs continued to feed on his remains. The other dogs, trapped in kennels, starved to death. The stench eventually attracted authorities, and they found a scene of unimaginable horror. The surviving dogs were euthanized due to their poor health and aggressive conditioning. His death marked the end of the puppy mill, but it came at a terrible cost. Then I recall another story, this one from August 22nd, 2014, the exclusive Cypress Point community in Florida. Roberto Mendez, a landscaper, was working alone, maintaining the grounds. He'd built his company from nothing, supporting his wife and 2 young children. The development was built on former Everglades wetlands, with decorative ponds connected to natural waterways. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife and was usually careful. But one afternoon, while trimming bushes around a pond, his hedge trimmer slipped into the water. He went in to retrieve it, assuming it was safe. He'd worked around similar ponds hundreds of times. But the moment his feet touched the muddy bottom, a 10-foot female alligator exploded into action, clamping down on his right leg. The alligator initiated her signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water. His screams echoed across the manicured grounds as the alligator continued her relentless attack. The water around Neptune Islands. It hosted some of the largest great white sharks on Earth. Apex predators that had ruled those seas, can you imagine, for over 400 million years. It's a humbling thought, to be in the presence of something so ancient and powerful. These magnificent hunters, they can reach lengths of over 20 feet, and weights exceeding 4,000 pounds. And those massive triangular heads, housing rows of razor-sharp, serrated teeth. Each tooth measuring up to 3 inches in length, designed to slice through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. Great whites, they possess the most powerful bite force of any living creature, capable of exerting over 4,000 pounds per square inch of crushing press. I've read accounts of attacks that still haunt me. Not long before, on March 22nd, 2017, a woman named Tara Whitfield arrived at those same Neptune Islands off the coast of South Australia. It's one of the world's premier great white shark diving destinations. These remote rocky outcrops jutted from the Southern Ocean, surrounded by crystal clear waters that plunged to depths of over 200 feet. These nutrient-rich waters, they serve as a natural highway for migrating great whites, drawing the massive predators to hunt those abundant seal colonies. Tara Whitfield, she was a 38-year-old marine biology graduate student from Los Angeles, and she had booked the most expensive shark cage diving package available. Right away, she began making unreasonable demands. She was known for her entitled attitude, this belief that money could buy her anything. She had already berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as Tara screamed at the crew for what she called their pathetic safety restrictions. Captain Morrison, he had 18 years of experience operating in those dangerous waters, and he'd dealt with difficult clients before. But Tara's aggressive behavior and complete lack of empathy alarmed him. She repeatedly demanded that the protective cage be removed entirely, claiming she had paid premium prices and deserved unrestricted access to the sharks. When Dr. Lisa Chen attempted to explain the life-threatening dangers, Tara dismissed her as an incompetent employee, someone who was clearly jealous of successful people. Tara had convinced herself that her graduate student status and expensive booking fee entitled her to special treatment. She threatened to destroy the company's reputation online and file lawsuits if the crew didn't provide her with the extreme experience she demanded. Her complete disregard for safety became evident when she suggested that crew members should enter the water first to test whether the sharks were dangerous. On this particular day, the crew had successfully attracted multiple great white sharks using a carefully prepared chum mixture. Among the responding predators was a massive 18-foot female, estimated to weigh over 4,000 pounds, and she had been feeding aggressively on the bait. The enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision while investigating the steel diving cage. Before even entering the water, Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction that would justify exiting the protective cage. She really believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged in the protective cage, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress to the surface crew, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming movements created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming immediately and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault, it was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck terror from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming serrated teeth. He and his wife, Martha, had built their operation from nothing, specializing in Rottweilers and German Shepherds. What had started as a hobby had grown into a modest business, with 8 breeding females and 3 males producing litters they sold across the southeast. But age, as it often does, had made Hank careless about safety protocols. In his younger days, he would never have entered a kennel alone, especially with breeding males during their territorial phases. He'd seen what these dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler. His massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. At 4 years old, he was in his prime, with a bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices from buyers seeking protection animals. Recently, however, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping and irritable, causing him to snap at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The veterinarian had prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament had grown increasingly unpredictable. Martha had expressed concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially given the dog's recent mood changes. But Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy and believed their bond was unbreakable. On that March afternoon, Martha had driven into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs. The kennels needed cleaning. Water bowls required filling, work Hank had done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached, the dog's dark eyes tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. The animal was panting heavily despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate and stepped inside, bucket in hand, his attention focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times, but today, Brutus was different. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail held low, his massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog. Brutus made his decision. There was no growling, no warning, just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away as Brutus's jaws found their target. The dog's teeth sank deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe and severing major blood vessels in a single catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. Blood pooled beneath his body as Brutus continued his attack, driven by instincts bred into his lineage for generations. The assault lasted less than 3 minutes, but the damage was irreversible. When Brutus finally released his grip, Hank lay motionless on the kennel floor, his life ebbing away in the Alabama heat. Martha returned home 2 hours later to find the property strangely quiet. She called out for Hank as she walked toward the kennels, but received no response. When she rounded the corner and saw Brutus standing guard over her husband's body, the full horror became clear. The dog's reaction to Martha's presence was immediate and threatening. He positioned himself between her and Hank's body, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Martha backed away slowly, dialing 911 from her truck. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 20 minutes, but Brutus refused to allow anyone near Hank's body. After consulting with animal control, the decision was made to shoot Brutus rather than risk additional casualties. The massive Rottweiler died with 3 bullets in his chest. The investigation concluded that Hank's death was a tragic accident caused by his failure to recognize warning signs of an aggressive, injured animal. The breeding operation was shut down, the remaining dogs relocated, and Martha was left to grieve both her husband and the animal that had been part of their family. Now, let's travel to a different landscape entirely. It was September 3rd, 2013, near the Toklat River in Denali National Park, Alaska. By early afternoon, the wind had dropped, and the landscape stood still, open and silent. From a distance, it looked calm, a place where nothing could happen quickly, but the quiet there was deceptive. Sarah Miller, 26, was an experienced backpacker from Anchorage. She was known for the last photo on her recovered camera. It was taken just 6 minutes before her estimated time of death. I can't stop thinking about that. A wide shot of the river valley, a small group of wolves following a caribou herd in the distance. Just moments later, everything changed. She was incredibly skilled and prepared. That week in Denali, Sarah planned a 2-day loop near the Tlat River, hoping to see the caribou migration. It was a route where wolves were often seen trailing the herds. She wasn't reckless. She carried bear spray, a GPS beacon, and enough food for 2 nights. Solo travel didn't scare her. She'd done it for years. She even documented her trips for small hiking blogs. She had the required permits for the Denali backcountry zones. Rangers remembered her asking about late-season wolf movements, but she didn't seem worried when they mentioned increased sightings near the river. Wolves were following caribou herds migrating south, and fresh tracks had been seen just days before. To Sarah, it was just part of the environment. She respected it, but she didn't fear it. Wolves in that region usually weighed between 70 and 100 pounds. They were built for endurance and speed, able to cover 40 miles in a day. Their jaws had a bite force of nearly 400 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone. But they rarely approached people, living mostly on caribou, hares, and ground squirrels. Still, when prey was scarce, or human scent carried traces of food, curiosity sometimes lingered. That week, rangers had posted advisories near trailheads, noting that several hikers reported wolves trailing them at a distance. Sarah likely saw those postings when she signed out, but there's no record she changed her route. Her confidence in her precautions was understandable. Statistically, Denali's wolves avoided confrontation. Around 4 p.m., a tourist group in a vehicle spotted a lone figure standing on a gravel bar below the ridge. It was Sarah. She waved before continuing upstream toward her camp. She reached her final GPS coordinate sometime before 4:45 p.m. Tracks found later showed she moved off the main gravel bar toward higher ground, probably planning to cut inland. The first sign of struggle began about half a mile from her tent. Her GPS recorded erratic movement, rapid looping, then a sudden stop. Investigators pieced together what happened next. The wolves had diverted toward her position once the herd passed out of sight. Sarah likely saw them coming. She deployed her bear spray once, and residue was found on nearby vegetation. But the wind shifted westward, causing some of the spray to blow back. It worked briefly, driving the wolves back about 20 feet before the cloud dispersed. They circled again, emboldened by the fading scent. One part of the group approached from behind, following her up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. A wolf likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay empty beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip, the kind wolves used to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve, recovered 20 feet away, still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night. The next morning, a helicopter spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing. They collected the camera and other items for analysis. The park temporarily closed multiple backcountry zones along the migration corridor. Genetic sampling confirmed the wolves belonged to the Tolat pack. Investigators determined the attack began as a predatory test or prey proxy response that escalated fatally. But with no repeated approach or food-seeking behavior observed, no removals were ordered. At a private debrief, rangers explained the findings to Sarah's parents, who later issued a short statement urging that the park not punish what it protects. It was April 14, 2018, when Monica Barrett arrived at Everglades National Park in Florida, one of the largest tropical wilderness areas in the United States. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched across 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marshes and shallow waterways that served as home to some of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's intricate network of channels created the perfect habitat for massive American alligators. Monica Barrett, a 44-year-old divorce attorney from Miami, had booked a solo kayak tour to clear her head after a difficult custody case. Known for her aggressive courtroom tactics and confrontational personality, she had built her legal career on intimidating opponents and refusing to back down from any challenge. She wanted to investigate some wildlife activity, claiming she had the right to explore any area as a tax-paying citizen. That lagoon was a primary nesting area for a massive 12-foot bull alligator defending his territory. The 800-pound reptile had already driven off smaller males. Monica's kayak triggered his most aggressive instincts. He detected the vibrations from her paddle strokes almost instantly. He'd been resting motionless beneath the surface, perfectly camouflaged. The attack was swift. The alligator launched itself from the water, its jaws clamping down on the front of Monica's kayak. The impact capsized her, throwing her into the murky water. As she struggled, disoriented, the alligator identified her as a threat. His jaws found purchase on her torso, teeth puncturing her life jacket and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite shattered ribs, punctured lungs, and severed blood vessels. Then came the death roll, a violent spinning motion to disorient prey. The reptile rotated rapidly, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its grip. The force tore muscles and caused catastrophic internal injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute. Her punctured lungs filled with water, and the crushing press prevented breathing. Her shattered ribs ground against each other, causing more internal bleeding. The trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within minutes. Tommy radioed for help, but it was too late. On May 14, 2017, in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Sarah Johnson, a 29-year-old nurse, was hiking with her fiancé, Tom. They were celebrating their engagement. Sarah loved nature photography and always carried her camera. She had a medical background, but limited experience with dangerous wildlife. She'd been hiking for years, building her skills. These mountain getaways were a relief from her stressful job at a busy trauma center. That afternoon, they found 2 black bear cubs playing in a meadow, with no mother in sight. Sarah knew it was a rare photo opportunity. It's a chilling thought that a moment of excitement, a desire to capture something beautiful, can turn deadly in the wilderness. I've read accounts of encounters with wildlife gone wrong, but Sarah's story always stays with me. She and her fiancé Tom were on what should have been a joyful engagement trip, a chance to create incredible memories. But what unfolded was a stark reminder of the raw power and protective instincts of nature. North America's black bears are generally common, but a mother bear with cubs is a force unlike any other. They become exponentially more aggressive, viewing any human presence as a direct threat to their young, a threat to be eliminated without hesitation. These mothers are incredibly strong and fast, capable of reaching speeds of up to 30 miles per hour through dense forests. Sarah, captivated by the sight of adorable cubs, started taking photographs, believing she was at a safe distance. Driven by the desire to capture the perfect shot, she gradually moved closer, despite Tom's repeated warnings to maintain distance. She was convinced the mother bear wasn't nearby as the cubs wrestled and tumbled in the meadow, oblivious to the danger. For nearly 10 minutes, she documented their every move, capturing dozens of images. Tragically, Sarah made a fatal error. She unknowingly positioned herself between the cubs and their natural escape route to the forest. As she adjusted her angle, she blocked their path to safety, triggering the mother bear's protective instincts. The mother had been watching from the tree line, and her charge was swift and terrifying. The 200-pound female covered the distance in mere seconds, her powerful legs propelling her with surprising speed, her fury focused on the perceived threat. Sarah, seeing the charging bear, tried to retreat, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward, still clutching her camera. The mother bear reached her before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. The bear's massive paw connected with Sarah's back, her razor-sharp claws raking across her spine and shoulders, the impact shattering several ribs. The camera flew from Sarah's grip as the bear's weight pinned her to the ground, her attempts to call for help silenced by the crushing prees on her chest.